Welcome to another episode of E.P.I.C, brought to you by With Purpose. My name is Chris, and I'm with our special guest today, Dana Vogelmeier. Dana is a workplace cultural strategist. She holds an undergraduate degree in business and a master's degree in leadership. She is a certified Pro-C change management practitioner and holds a designation of certified professional in talent development, or all that in four letters, CPTD. Dana is a facilitator for the Association of Talent Development and works with all industries in improving their workplace and works primarily on workplace culture, employee engagement, and change management. Welcome to the podcast, Dana. How are you?
I'm fabulous, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
What a treasure trove of wisdom that you have, and experience and expertise.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I worked for a long, long time and just really gathered a lot of my experiences, learned from failures and successes and from watching others, and just really tried to compile all of that to use it to help other companies.
Gotcha. Well, we share some similar interests. I have a master's in leadership as well. I love just people and helping people. And I know that as we get through this today, our listeners are going to know that about you as well. So let me start off this by saying and asking you this: why a workplace cultural strategist? Like, how did you enter that field?
So a big part of this came while I was still working at a Fortune 50 company. I was there for 33 years, but I had worked in a lot of different departments, and I was a leader for more than 25 years in different units of different kinds of employees too. And I'd had a lot of really great leaders myself and some great teams, those magical teams that just gel and get things done, and everybody, is really respectful and gets along well. But then I also had, occasionally the teams that couldn't really find harmony. And then I had one particular situation where I had a leader that was just, I felt like I just really kind of hit a wall and was really struggling to find the value in my work during that time. I didn't feel like we were connecting and we were not on the same page with things. And I didn't feel like I was adding value during that time. And I had already been with the company for quite some time when this happened. So I started kind of looking back at all of the previous experiences that I had had, and some examples of previous leaders that were really good, and some great experiences I had had, and started examining workplace culture. And then I looked into organizations that are big researchers around workplace culture, and got certified through an organization called the Culture Works. And so a workplace culture strategist is someone who kind of comes in and does a little bit of discovery and looks around and asks some questions and does some analysis around what's happening in the workplace and what are maybe one or two, maybe three things that we could tweak to make it a little bit better so people love where they work, they feel valued, appreciated, and they will provide discretionary effort and just do great work for the company when they feel that way. And I have felt that way. And I just want everybody to feel that way.
I love that. What like right now, based upon a previous client or something that you're seeing today in the culture of the workplace, what is your number one favorite moment?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think what I hear, especially over these last, I'll call it year and a half, if you will, right before the pandemic, what I was being asked about a lot was accountability, just helping leaders hold people accountable. But of course, then as the pandemic hit and things changed overnight and people's situations at home and their work-life balance and everything really changed. So then it was the compassion and empathy that leaders were showing for different situations. And there are many situations that I talked people through, but I will say that one that I really, really loved that I saw just over and over again on the news. So not clients of mine, but on the news, you saw companies whose leaders decided that they weren't going to take their checks during this time so that they could use that and push it back so that people could remain employed even if they didn't have enough business. Some of the frontline workers in different organizations were giving bonuses as an appreciation for coming out during, especially if you remember kind of early on when things were really scary and we didn't know a lot.
Right.
And so I loved that. I loved how some companies really were stepping up, and I kept kind of every time I would see one, I would kind of, clip the article and share it because I wanted everybody to know, like, look at what these companies are doing. This is amazing. So I kept all of those because I thought these are going to be really interesting to look at again, maybe year in this year and then another year. And then 2 years from now, when hopefully a lot of this is in our rearview mirror and it's just a memory. So, I want to remember those companies and the great work they did. And I'm sure that they're going to fare very well.
I would agree with you. And I also think that, I was just reading something this morning that valuing people is so important. And people just, they're not incentivized by a big, huge paycheck anymore. They just want to feel value. And so that
Yeah.
helps us engage with people, right? People want to be engaged. Why do you think people are disengaged?
I think people become disengaged when they don't feel valued and feel like, I'm just kind of here for the benefit of like this one thing. And maybe they don't have friends at work. They don't know how they're contributing to the bigger picture. I think there's a number of things that can show up that make people feel disengaged. But the way to help people feel very engaged is to show that alignment. What is your work doing that's helping us meet these big organizational goals? Like, you are important and we value you being here to do this role because it matters. I think that's a big way. Another big way to help people become engaged is to get to know them and to spend some time with them. And when you're having one-on-one meetings, which by the way, need to be consistent and valuable meeting time, undivided attention, those meetings could be information about what's going on in the job, but also what's going on outside of the job. And anytime that you as a leader can help your people in something that they're experiencing outside of work, that will go a long way. So I think that tapping in and really checking in with people will make a huge difference in their level of engagement. Otherwise, they just feel like they're just kind of there and no one really cares. Why should they care?
Well, yeah. So, you brought up a really valuable point about being consistent in the commitment and checking in with your people. Do you have a recommendation, Dana, that says we should be checking in with our people X amount of time, either daily during the week or the course of the month?
Yeah. So what I kind of feel is sort of a best practice is if they're new, if they're struggling to meet expectations, you probably want to meet weekly. And there needs to be consistency in the conversation. So, especially if they're new, they're still trying to just figure it all out. Like, where even do we store our documents? Or, you know, if you're in person, where do I go for this or go for that? But if you're not in person, who do I tap into? That's a little harder, even. Who on my team do I ping to find out questions? But that weekly, then the person knows they're going to have an opportunity to meet with their leader every week. If they've been around a little longer, or maybe they are a little higher in the organization, they might not need a weekly meeting. And then you might move to a monthly meeting. But still, consistency is important. So every week, every month, don't cancel. If you can't meet that time, then reschedule it. But make sure that you're still checking in. It's too easy for us to, oh, things are fine, we don't need to meet. And then things aren't fine. And now it's a different kind of conversation. The other thing is too, if I know I can count on you in those meetings, I might kind of save up some things. But then if you cancel, by the time we meet again, we may never get to that list because a whole new list. So how do I know what to juggle? What are my priorities? And again, especially if they're new or not meeting expectations, knowing all of that is really important. You want them to be successful. So set them up for success in that way.
Really like that. So really what you're saying is you have to know your people in order to communicate very well with them and then even connect with them. which I'm a big proponent on, and you're just saying it in a different way, because people are valuable. In fact, without people, they're the greatest asset a business has. Agreed?
Agreed.
So
Hmm.
okay, so we know that it's the business's greatest asset is people, is human beings, doing whatever it is that they do, making products or providing a service. So what impacts can an engaged workforce have on the business then?
Oh, so many. I love this question. So, study after study shows that if you have an engaged workforce, you will outperform your competitors who don't. So, it increases morale, for one thing. And when morale is increased, people like going to work. So, they're there, you can depend on them. They're a good colleague. And so, collaboration and problem solving improves. When those things happen, then productivity improves. And when productivity improves, profitability improves. And I just love how kind of the whole ripple effect takes over when you have a highly engaged workplace. One of the things that I love that I think a lot of times companies don't think about too, when you have an engaged workplace, you have higher productivity and profitability, and it puts you in a position to maybe expand. So maybe you've been wanting to open a second location or a 20th location or whatever it is. But the more you can do, the higher the productivity and profitability, that's also going to come out and spill into the community, right? You've got engaged people who are happy, who are fulfilled with their work, and they're going out into the community. They're talking to their family members in a very engaged way. They're maybe talking with wait staff at the restaurant in a very engaged and positive way, and all of that kind of spills out. But also, you've expanded, so maybe you've employed more people. So now there's less unemployment. There are more taxes being paid going out to repair the roads and the bridges and things. So, I mean, it kind of can lift everything if we can get to that place. But sometimes those things we don't really think about how it's going to impact all the other stuff too. It can really, I truly believe that an engaged workforce can change the world.
Okay, I would agree with you. So let's talk about that disengaged employee. How do I, as a business owner or a business leader, maybe even a manager or a supervisor, how do I start that conversation with a disengaged employee?
Yeah, that's a hard one because I think, we sometimes see disengaged and we think, bad attitude and negative and so that's a hard place to start a conversation. But when you have your one-on-one meeting and you start asking questions of, what are you working on? And so they answer that and how can I help you? So now, oh, like I've got support. So someone cares and is concerned about me and my work and asking questions to kind of just work through that. Like, how can we uncover what it is that maybe is upsetting to that individual? But getting to those questions are what's going to help you get there. And it's not the same for everybody. It could be that they're going through some really tough times at home. Maybe they have a child that's being bullied at school. And so it's really about that and not about work. So, how can we uncover what it is? And I remember talking to a gentleman once that he was new, or I was new to their team. I was brought in as the leader. And, he was always kind of grumpy. And I asked some questions, was trying to figure out what was going on. And he was still irritated over something that had happened to him in that same department at that same company 7 years prior. And I said, wow, I mean, that's been a long time. At what point can we let that go? And he just really was just holding it, and he didn't let it go in the office right there during that conversation. But, he knew that I cared. I was trying to help him uncover why it was bothering him so much still. And, for his benefit, how could we let that go? And for the benefit of the team. So the team struggled with some harmony. And I was trying to share with him a little bit of the negative impact he was having on others and what that was doing. So you never know what it's going to be. I mean, 7 years prior, that's amazing. But it was, it started with one conversation.
Yeah, and really, you know what? That's all it does start with, isn't it? It's just one person having that one intentional conversation. Because what happens is when you, to your example, someone harbored ill
Yeah.
feelings, whatever was done wrong to them or whatever had taken place for 7 years. And in that, they literally kind of put their heels in the ground, right? They're not going to change regardless of whatever the company has had it around them is changing or the environment around them. And yet at the same time, we know that the only thing that is taking place is change. That's the what's the phrase? Is it the
The
oh,
only thing constant is change or something
that's
like
right.
that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, we know that change is difficult to come by. And more often than not, people are a little frustrated with it, especially when they don't have the answer to the question of why. So, why do you think when businesses either because of an external cause or an internal cause, why do you think that people are so resistant to change initiatives or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that people are resistant to the unknown and how is this going to impact me? And so there's a lot of work that's done by the ProSci organization around the people side of change. And when people don't know or they fear what's coming, they're not going to embrace the change and they're not going to work to make it successful. And if you can help people understand what it is, even if it might mean something kind of what they perceive as negative to them, then if you can kind of talk it through and what this is doing and why we're doing it and maybe how this can work for you, then they'll get on board. But I led through a rough change one time where we were actually going through a restructure in the organization and a lot of people were going to be laid off. And so many of my team members knew, something like this was coming. And so people were kind of mentally preparing for it. And that's really hard when oh my gosh, it could be me. I might be laid off. And then when the news came and lots of people were laid off, you have to kind of let them work through their emotions a little bit, but kind of keep in front of them why this is happening, what and when is happening, and how I can help support you through this change. And so if that means looking for another job, I'll help you look for another job. And we really spent a lot of time doing that for people that we're going to be displaced. And you eventually come out on the other side. And then lots of people now, they love what they're doing and they maybe
Nice.
never would have left, but for, this big change that came. So it can work out, but, we get stuck in kind of our way and like, this is my thing. And, the identity around where I work and what I do. So what am I if I'm not there? And so it's just kind of scary. And I think if you let people know, if you can provide some psychological safety and let them know that I'll help you to the best extent that I can, then they don't feel alone.
Yeah, and that's really what people want, right? Is to know that they're
Right.
part of something greater than them, but part of a team, that they're not in it by themselves. So how do you help people who are negatively impacted by a change?
So yeah, I think it depends on the extent of the change and how much this is going to negatively impact them. So in that situation I explained before, where people were losing their jobs, I mean, that was big, and a very heavy time. It felt heavy in the office, just the whole atmosphere. And so that was constant checking in, daily checking in, and how are we doing, and did you meet up with so and so, and who else can I connect you with, and that kind of thing. So that was a big one. But another kind of interesting change story that I worked on once, when we were going through a remodel. So, new carpet, new chairs, and everything. So, obviously, we were still in the office at the time. And one person really did not want to give up her current chair. She loved her chair, and it was orange. And she didn't want to get the new blue chair that was coming in, but the blue chairs were better. And, they were new and much structured, much more purposefully for like back and neck pains and things like that. And she just didn't want to give up her old chair. And so, fortunately, the top leader in that department said, we're just going to let her keep the orange chair. So I think you have to kind of note, like how big, when do you let something go? Because it's not something that we have to do. It's not like it's a regulation or something like that, a law. So we'll have one department that has one orange chair in it. Not the end of the world. And it was really meaningful to her to be able to keep that chair. But imagine if they'd said, nope, you're going to take the blue one, like it or not. Did it really matter? It didn't. So I think, to your question, it kind of depends on the magnitude and the person.
Right. Oh, I like that. I like that story. Thank you for sharing. So what would be the best compliment you've ever received?
Well, I would say, so I had, when I used to work in Texas, and I had a really, really great peer, and we worked together for many years and formed a wonderful friendship. But when I was leaving there, I was moving from Texas to Illinois. And when I was leaving there, we had a going away party and everything. And she talked about being a great partner, and that she always knew that I supported her and worked with her and collaborated with her. And she said, I never once felt like we were competitive with one another.
Wow.
And we were, and I loved that, because, sometimes you work with people who feel like, they're, kind of fighting for the next opportunity or whatever. And so maybe they want to look good and, aren't going to kind of collaborate with you in the same way. But we were a team, and we complemented each other's skill set in a great way too. But I just remember when she, said that when I was leaving, and it was just probably one of the nicest things I've ever heard.
That's a great remark, a great star on your refrigerator starboard, right? That's really nice. That's a great compliment. And you don't hear those kind of compliments a lot. So I like that. So as we kind of wrap this up, Dana, what are a couple things that you want the listeners to take away?
Well, I think two things. I appreciate you asking this, Chris, because I think the first thing is that if you're a leader, to take pause and reflect and examine what's going on in your workplace. Do you hear laughter? Do people get along well? Or are people coming to you saying, Chris isn't doing his work, or, what's going on? Because when you kind of take a step back and assess, now you're kind of taking stock of your current workplace culture and what needs to change. And almost every organization, needs to change one or two things. And in some departments, it might be one or two things. And in another department, it might be a different one or two things. Because each culture in an organization is one thing, but then you have sort of subcultures that pop up in different departments, because different leaders kind of set a different tone. So if you're a leader, look at what's going on in your department. And if you have employee opinion surveys or some kind of a pulse survey that you can look at what people are telling you, that is a good place to start with making some change. So I would say for leaders, that. And then for people who might be a leader, but also might be in a non-leader role, but just aren't feeling it where they're at, they're just not loving it. They don't go home at the end of the day feeling fulfilled. Instead, they go home at the end of the day feeling drained and, oh, why did, the alarm goes off the next morning and they're like, snooze. I mean, if you're feeling that, we work something like 40 or 50 years in our lifetimes. So examine it. And if you cannot change it internally, it's time to examine and see if there's a change you might need to make, and go somewhere else where you do feel good and you do feel valued and you're not drained at the end of the day. We work too long, too many hours to feel not valued, not appreciated, and not fulfilled.
Agreed. Great points. I hope everyone listening has written that down. If not, rewind it and play it again and make sure you get it written down. Dana, it's been a pleasure to have you on our podcast. Thank you so much. How can people find you? Facebook, mailing address, website, phone, that type of thing?
Yeah, so my website is vogelmeierconsulting.com, and Vogelmeier is Vogelmeier. It's a lot of letters. Or Dana@vogelmeierconsulting.com. And I'm on all the social media sites. So any of those, just stick my name in and you'll find me.
Wonderful. Well, it's been a treat to have
Thank
you
you.
today. Thank you very much for allowing me the privilege to serve you and to host you today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. This was great. I appreciate it.
Good. Well, we're going to have you back on because I know that there's other, we just hit the tip of the iceberg, and I think we're hit the tip of the iceberg. And there's even more questions going through my mind right now. So I want to get you back on. But again, thank you so much. And for our listeners, please reach out to Dana, even just in a simple email, just to say thanks for your information, thanks for your education, whatever the case might be. And again, my name is Chris. I want to say thank you for listening to this podcast of EPIC, Elite Professionals in Coaching. It's been my privilege to serve you, and make it a great day. And as I always like to say, live with purpose.